Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the u3a radio podcast, a monthly look at u3a events and people nationwide. I'm Nick Bailey, and in this edition, we talk to the winners of the recent u3a poetry competition.
When I was a child, I started to write. I loved the music of language.
If anything, I'm just an enthusiastic consumer of all types of literature.
I must admit, I'm absolutely gobsmacked to have won.
And we look ahead to U3A week in September, when the Northants Network will be walking the equivalent of a mile for every member.
The challenge was phrased as each participating U3A totals the number of members it has at one point in time, and then walks as a minimum those miles between now and September the 21st.
But first, we turn our attention to Ukraine. Since Russia's invasion of the country in February, many people in the UK have opened their homes to Ukrainian refugees, including the Harwood family who live in southeast Cornwall. Linda Harwood, who's a member of the Lou and District U3A, joins me now. Linda, welcome.
Thank you.
Was this something you and your husband wanted to do as soon as the scheme was opened?
Yes, it was really, because we have extra capacity in the house because we have grandchildren and children come to stay, particularly in the holidays. And most of the time the rooms are empty. That's 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. And we thought that would be ideal to offer to a Ukrainian family.
How easy was it to do? Because there were a lot of complaints about red tape, weren't there?
It was actually very difficult because it was early days and I don't think the processes were in place with the government and the different agencies. But in fact, in our case, it was quite quick because we registered with the Ukrainian families scheme. It was in March, at the end of March, and by the 13th of April, we actually were picking them up at Bristol Airport, which actually is quite speedy.
And what kind of family do you have, if you could just explain who's staying with you?
Yes, of course. It's a mother who's in her late 30s and her 2 daughters. One is aged 11 and one is 6 years old.
And when they arrived, did you face any difficulties with language, for instance?
Yes, we did, because they had very little English, but the apps on the mobile phones are so good that we converse using the translator.
And what about food?
Food was quite problematic to start with, I'm afraid, because they do have different style of eating and they didn't like my cooking at all. But we got round that because they cook their own food. So we share the kitchen space. They have their own sort of shelves, an area to keep their food, and we just take it in turns to use the kitchen. And that is much better. And it's nicer for the children because they really didn't like my food.
What about language now? Have they picked up any English and have you picked up any Ukrainian?
They have picked up English quite quickly. Every day they seem to be getting more confident and learning more words. They were quite specific that the children wanted to learn English, so they didn't want to have Ukrainian books. They've asked not to have Ukrainian channels on the television because one of the areas that they have is our conservatory, and we've got a television and put Ukrainian programs on for them. But she wants them specifically to learn English as quickly as possible. So I've only known things like, do you want a cup of tea or coffee? So I learn very basic words in Ukrainian, but that's it, because they're learning very fast.
Now, the children, as you say, are 11 and 6. So have they enrolled at a local school?
Yes, they're in their 3rd week now at the local school in Lou. They've settled in very well. Of course, you get the odd days when they don't want to go to school, but I think that's the same with all children. But they've been made very, very welcome. And the school were very helpful and immediately came up with some school uniform for them so they could start straight away in the correct uniform. I think it was probably the 2nd week that they were here that they started.
And of course, you live near the beach or in a seaside town. And have the children taken to that?
Yes, they do. Yes, they have. We've had lots of walks along the beach. They love climbing on the rocks and exploring the seashore. We've had some good walks along to Port Nadler, which is along the coastal path and down. And there's a very nice play park in Lou as well, and they love that.
Well, this sounds idyllic, but of course the whole situation is not idyllic at all because they are refugees. They had to flee Ukraine. Can you tell me their story?
They are from a suburb just north of Kyiv. The husband has stayed behind. He has a vegetable oil company, but it's getting very difficult to continue with that because there's hardly any fuel available. And of course, their economy is collapsing. Ludmila's sister, she also wants to come over here, and she has luckily got someone else in Lou who's going to have her, and she's going to be over in about 2 weeks. And I think that'll be a great comfort to our family to have an aunt there and a sister.
And Ludmila, I think she was working in Kyiv, wasn't she?
Yes, she's a teacher, a maths teacher. And in time, when her language improves, she wants to go and have a teaching job here if possible. Meanwhile, she has got herself a job in Hannaford Point as part of the cleaning team. And the hours are very good. They're between 9 and 2 o'clock, 3 times a week, so 15 hours. So that's also a good start and will help for her CV and things like that.
Well, I was going to ask what happens on the financial side, because I think the government give you, don't they, £350 a month, is it?
Yes, we do. And then when they arrive in the country, they have £200 per person. Now, that was arranged very quickly. I'd say within a week, we were taking them to the post office with a code, and the post office give them the £600 in cash. So that's a good starting point. Ludmila is also, we've taken her to Liscard, so she is signed on for universal credit. She will get child benefit. She's got a national insurance number now. And of course, you have to arrange for the bank account and sign on with a doctor and get a SIM card and things like that. So in time, once this all kicks in, which should be at the end of the month, she will be in a reasonable financial situation because, of course, she has no bills at all. So which will be good.
So the £350, that is to go to you to help you to alleviate the costs that you have to incur.
Yes, I think it was sort of the government wanted to do that as an incentive. And there are obviously costs involved because you buy an additional heater and a television for them and things like that. And of course, the everyday bills. But I think they pitched it about right. If it was more, it would be too much of an inducement to do it, which it shouldn't be.
There are several. I mean, Lou is a town of 5,000 people, but I think it's punching above its weight because I know there are something like half a dozen families that have taken in Ukrainian refugees. Have you managed to put your family in touch with any other Ukrainian families that have come to Lou?
Yes, we have. There's another mother and a daughter in Lou itself, and they've made friends with our family. And in fact, opposite now, a young lady of 21 has just moved. So the group is getting it's getting in touch with each other, which is fantastic and a lovely support for them because they can at least speak to each other in their own language. And of course, there are some events being planned where they can all get together.
The initial contract, I think, is for 6 months. What happens after that if the situation in Ukraine is still as bad as it is?
I think that's where it's going to be quite a worry, because the housing situation in Cornwall, as with most of the country, is not good at all. And I think that people probably will feel that 6 months is it, and time to either go home or move on to other accommodation. But whether other accommodation will be available is another question.
What are your feelings about it?
My feelings are that I would like them to leave at 6 months, only because I have had to put off my own children and grandchildren from coming to stay. And I feel that I don't want to, I don't know how to word it, but I'd like them to be able to come and stay again.
Well, Linda, thank you very much for talking to me. And who knows, if we speak again in 6 months, you might be a fluent Ukrainian speaker.
I know it might be. I think there's room for improvement.
All right. Linda, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
The winners of the second u3a poetry competition, with almost 250 entries, have just been announced. Entrants had to write a poem on the theme of new that was no longer than 16 lines and with a rhyming component. Ella Watts caught up with the 3 top successful entrants, who in the judges' eyes all deserved first place. She first spoke to Denise Bennett from Havant u3a. When did she first realise she could express herself well in poetry?
When I was a child, I started to write. I loved the music of language and the way the words could tell a narrative and how they could move me. So I've always loved poetry since I've been a child.
How do you start a poem, Denise? You know, what inspires you to get something down on paper?
Sometimes it's something that's an overheard conversation, or it's an image that I see, or perhaps something I hear on the radio. Anything can inspire me. And I'm inspired. I live in a very historical place near Portsmouth, so I'm very much inspired by my local surroundings.
So are your poems, do you do some naval poems?
I do quite a lot connected to, Portsmouth, yes.
What arrives in your head first? Is it a rhyme? Is it a phrase? Is it complete?
No, it doesn't arrive complete. It might be a phrase that goes around in my head for a long time, and then it nags me to write it down. And then I have to decide to myself, what is the message I'm going to reveal in this poem? What do I actually want to say? So I write that idea out in prose, and then I do something called flow writing, which just takes the idea and I write without stopping or hesitation for about 10 minutes. And then I extract the seeds, the material that I've got for my poem. So I do lots of things before I actually start to write in lines. I never start to write in lines first. It doesn't happen like that for me.
Well, that's very interesting. I've never heard that before. I'm learning here. So what did you think of this year's theme for the u3a poetry competition? It was new.
I thought new was a very, very broad subject, a great subject to write about. And I was instantly drawn to write about my daughter changing her name, which is quite exciting for her and interesting as a parent.
So what is your poem called?
It's called Jay.
And is that your daughter's new name?
Yes, it is, yes.
Wow, that's amazing. Would you be able to read us this poem?
This is called Jay. She wishes to be known by her new name now, so I practice writing it in sand and snow, scribble it in black ink in steam on the window. Although the midwife handed me Emily Jane, it's only the name I mourn. She's just the same. Happier now with Jay, more neutral, more plain. My grown-up daughter with her chosen new name.
That's lovely. That must have been very moving and quite difficult, really.
I think you have to tell it with joy. There may be things that you might be concerned about it in the first instance, but it has to be told with joy.
Well, Denise, that's obviously something that's based on your own life experience. Do all your poems come from life experience?
No, not at all. Sometimes they come from other people's life experience, or, as I say, I'm very much keen on writing about history, particularly as I live in a place of historical interest. So I might write about something about Emma Hamilton and what she wrote to Nelson. I know quite a few things that perhaps aren't, widely known, that the fact that she did have twins, there wasn't just Horatio, there was another twin. So I might write in her voice about what happened to the other twin, which wouldn't be true. Obviously, it would be hearsay.
So you've got 3 collections published and you're working on another. What do you call them? What do you call your collections? Do they have a name, or is it just collection 1, 2, 3?
No, the first one is Planting the Snow Queen, which is about planting a tree, a silver birch, in my garden to mark her 30th wedding anniversary. The second one is called Parachute Silk, which is about how women would gather parachute silk to make dresses, their wedding dresses, and about different parachutes that we use, parachutes from prisoners, etc. And in the end, a beautiful thing would be made to commemorate a lovely occasion. So that was the crux of that poem. And the third collection is called Water Chits, which is about soldiers at Gallipoli who didn't have enough water to survive, and they had to collect it. And it was quite difficult for them to just get fresh water to wash wounds, to prepare food, to drink, and lots of them died from thirst.
So where do you think your poetry words are going to take you in the future?
I don't know, but I hope they won't leave me. It's my passion, so I'm hoping I'll have another collection soon.
Denise Bennett, and Denise's most recent collection of poems, Water Chits, is available from Amazon. Ella spoke next to Frank Edwards from Barnet u3a in London and asked if he'd written a lot of poetry.
Not a huge amount, to be honest. And the poetry I have written in the past has been primarily just for my own purposes. So I guess I've written bits and pieces since my early 20s, but you could number them on one hand. So I'm hardly an experienced or very regular poetry writer.
But you are one of the wonderful winners of our u3a poetry competition this year.
Yes.
I think you did a writing course, didn't you?
Some about 25 years ago, I did a creative writing evening class at Birkbeck College. From memory, that was about 20 sessions spread over 3 terms. So I did that. I've also studied English. I did English A-level, and I did an English course with the OU not very long ago. But when I joined the creative writing group in Barnet u3a, that was the first time for a long time that I'd actually produced anything to share with other people. If anything, I'm just an enthusiastic consumer of all types of literature. And I guess, like a lot of people, think, well, I could do that sometimes. So just occasionally I've jotted down lines, bits of phrasing, and I've written very short pieces of sort of text fiction as well. But it's very much a small time hobby, if you like. I wouldn't put myself down as a writer. Not really.
So tell me a little bit about the poem, your winning poem, Frank.
Okay. Well, it's very, it's 8 lines long. It's very short. It's very simple. It's about a sunset. It was prompted, I guess, because, like a lot of people, sunsets are very dramatic ends to any day. I've witnessed loads of sunsets. They're always something which makes you think of your own position in the world, where you are as an individual with this great globe around you. But I was prompted, I think, mainly by spending a lot of time in southeast Cornwall, in a bit of Cornwall which isn't that well known, called the Rain Peninsula. And I was fortunate enough, through generosity of some family members, to be able to spend a lot of time in a cliff-top chalet overlooking Whitsand Bay, if anybody knows that part of the world. And one of the many delights of being in Whitsand Bay were the dramatic sunsets. So often with a glass of wine in my hand, I would gaze out over the sea, witnessing this sunset. And it was that, I think, which prompted me to jot down these lines, which I did a few years ago. And then I just by chance saw that there was the u3a competition. And I thought, I wonder if those lines would work. So I dug them out, and they didn't really. So I had to work on them a bit longer, change a few things, add a few things, make sure that I had the word new in there, so to fit the theme. I did that. I didn't, to be honest, I spent about 2 hours on it, and then sent them in and more or less forgot about it. So I was quite surprised to get the email to say that I'd been chosen as one of the winners.
Is that the first competition that you've entered?
It is. Yes, it is.
That's wonderful. What did you call your poem?
New Day.
Would you like to read that for us?
Oh, okay.
Such a beautiful part of the world. No wonder you were inspired to write a poem.
It is a beautiful part of the world. It's actually also, I think it's known as the forgotten or undiscovered Cornwall. It's a bit of Cornwall that not many people know about.
You say it's largely undiscovered. You realise when the podcast goes out, it will be very famous indeed.
Well, okay. This is my poem. It's called New Day, and it goes as follows. Sunset settles on silver sea. The earth turns 1 more degree. As cliff tops fade and songbirds call, night and darkness start to fall. Lament this end, but keep in mind time's cruel shifts are also kind, as heat and light drain slow away, somewhere else becomes new day. That's it. And it's just trying to express the idea that if you're looking at a sunset in the west, at that very same time, somebody else is looking at that very same sun as a sunrise in the east.
Frank Edwards. And the third joint winner of the U3a poetry competition is Dr. Jocelyn Wishart from Fairford and District U3a in Gloucestershire, who explained to Ella the doctor in front of her name.
I escaped from a very boring, mundane job into the world of psychological research and spent some time at the University of Surrey developing computer systems for warning people in emergency situations, and went on to study people's behaviour and in particular fires. Ended up designing a computer game to advise children on what to do in the case of a fire. And that was shown on Tomorrow's World.
And then, Jocelyn, you moved into teaching, I think, didn't you?
Yes, as a result of researching with young children, I decided that I was very entertained and enjoyed working with them. And I couldn't get a local course in computing, teaching computing, so I studied to be a science teacher. But of course, when I went into school, the first thing they did said, "Can you teach computing? We've just lost the computing teacher." And then 2 years later, "You've got half a degree in psychology. We need somebody to teach psychology." And I ended up as head of psychology in a school in Bristol.
You had an amazing career. Now, when did poetry take you?
It's always been kind of a sideline. I was one of those fortunate people who got pretty much the same mark for every exam. And so I was pushed towards science by the school. And I never really got my chance to explore English literature and creative writing. So every now and then I just get the urge to write a poem. And with the U3a, we've been doing formal poetry structures. And so I've done a lot more writing poetry in these past 2 or 3 years than I managed previously.
Now, when you entered the U3a poetry competition, it was themed, and the theme was new. Did you have to approach writing this poem in a different way to your usual style?
Well, I did, because I tend to write quite witty, funny poems, so call them doggerel or whatever, something that make people laugh. And I went through, took me a long, long time. I went through a lot of themes for new, a new baby, a new life, cracking the spine of a new book, the soft caress of a new shirt, the first sniff after piercing the foil of a jar of Nescafe. I even got a little bit scientific. Hydrogen atoms rebounding, whirling, 5 seconds of white hot hope. That was the Big Bang. But I decided that I was getting awfully twee. Everybody would be writing about the smell of a newborn baby's head or new flowers in the spring. And it was about the same time of year as the undersea eruption had occurred near Tonga, and new land was being formed. I got hung up on the word subterranean. I don't know what it is about. There's some words that just make you want to write poetry. Words like iridescent, subterranean. And then I discovered that larghissimo means very, very, very slowly as a musical term. And I discovered I could rhyme archipelago with larghissimo. And this was like fulfilling all the criteria, so I swapped.
What did you call this poem?
I called it New Land.
Would you be able to read that one to us?
Subterranean rumblings grow, Huge, earth-shattering tremors start, triggering white-hot lava flow. Tectonic plates are pushed apart in a hoarse, grating staccato of shrieks that tear at the Earth's heart. Molten rock gushes forth, making the oceans hiss steam, boil and heave. Tsunamis form, grimly fanning this chaos out across the seas. The birth of a new island, part of the South Seas archipelago, means now that sailors will need a new shot, where the black cracked rocks do not show how hidden forces ripped apart the very hour. Largissimo.
Jocelyn Wishart with her poem New Land, one of the winners in the u3a poetry competition. The poems from the top 3 winners, along with the rest of the shortlisted entries, can be viewed on our website at u3a.org.uk/learning. u3a members in Northamptonshire are planning to mark u3a Week in September with a showcase of what local u3as can offer. It will take place at Chester House Estate near Wellingborough, and it will also celebrate the completion of the Northants Network, walking as many miles as it has members. Tony Mays of Wellingborough and District u3a is one of the organisers. Sarah Goodall asked him how the plans had taken shape.
Well, there are 2 distinct stages to the event. The first stage is what we call a mile a member walking challenge. And the second stage is a day at Chester House Estate. Now, the first stage, the mile a member walking challenge, is something that we started initially in March 2021, when I attended a network meeting where we discussed National u3a Day activities. The network is supporting a proposal we have made for each u3a in Northamptonshire to walk at least as a minimum the same number of miles as it has members. And so I thought that phrasing the walking event as a challenge would appeal to u3a members, because they're the sort of people that like to get things done. The challenge was phrased as each participating u3a totals the number of members it has at one point in time, and then walks as a minimum those miles between now and September the 21st.
Can I just ask you about what numbers are we talking about?
There are 13 u3as operating within the Northants Network, and 9 of those u3as have agreed to join us in the challenge.
And what's that sort of membership total looking like?
We're expecting at least 4,000, if not 5,000 members to be participating.
And are the 9 who are joining in, is each member going to walk?
No, what will probably happen is each u3a group usually has a walking group. The walking groups, in say our case, the walking group will contribute the majority of the miles, but any member of the u3a group can contribute their own miles. For example, in Wellingborough, we have a walking group that meets once a month with 18 to 20 members, and they walk between 4 and 5 miles. So that's 80 to 90 miles immediately. And I think we anticipate the majority will be done by walking groups, but any other member can also contribute miles towards the challenge. The last section of the walks will be done by a member of each of the participating u3a will walk together for the last section. So it'll be like a grand finale.
What have you got lined up for the actual day of activities?
So we are hoping to have groups there from various u3as showcasing their activities. So it might be groups like the ukulele group, Tai Chi group, crafts, country dancing. There'll be food there, possibly a hog roast. We're anticipating at least 1,000 people there.
Going back to the network, Tony, I don't think many u3a members will totally understand what a network is and what it does. Could you tell me a little bit about the Northants Network?
The Northants Network meets 3 times a year. It's chaired by one of the chairs of the local u3as, and usually members of each of the participating u3as attend, either the chairman or the vice chairman usually attends. And it's a forum for people to exchange ideas, to organise events, and to exchange ideas between u3as so that we don't continue to reinvent the wheel. For example, The Northants Network has been active for at least 15 years. During those last 14 years, the number of u3as joining the network has increased from 7 to 13. And the network organises an event each year. Some years it's been a visit to a stately home, where the stately home is opened the day just for us. On another occasion, the network organised a visit to Silverstone Racing Circuit, and we did tours of the racing. And as I said, we always hold peer-to-peer workshops in the network where, for example, the social secretaries from the various groups get together, exchange ideas, what works and what doesn't work. So the network's an extremely valuable way of getting people from within your own county, getting them around the table, exchanging ideas, deriving benefits from it, and organising events.
Tony Mays of Wellingborough and District U3a. And we wish Northants Network all the best for their walking challenge. But this is where we run out of puff for this edition. Don't forget, you can always get in touch with us if you have a group you'd like to promote, or you have someone within your U3a who may be of interest to a wider audience through our podcast. You can email us through communications@u3a.org.uk. That's communications@u3a.org.uk. My thanks to Sarah Goodall and Ella Watts for the interviews, and also to Ella for producing the podcast. Until next time, this is Nick Bailey saying goodbye.